Hi everyone, I'm Jill Reagan and welcome back to Whispering Willow Farm. So we are in the beginning of May, and May is a very fun, exciting time for a flower grower because it is when most of us are getting a lot of those amazing cut flowers out of our house, out of our greenhouses. Maybe we're direct seeding them in the ground, but May is a real signifying moment of, all right, it is time to get some cut flowers in the ground for a bountiful harvest all summer. So I'm going to be talking with you guys today on my top cut flowers to plant in May if you are trying to figure out what you need to plant in your backyard garden. So you might have noticed with all of the pots and trays sprinkled about, we have been on a planting frenzy. So we have been getting so many things out from our seedling greenhouse and into the ground behind me. But one of the great things about the top cut flowers I'm going to share with you to plant in May is that they can all be direct seeded. So there are two different things here. You've got direct seeded and transplanted. So direct seeded is about as straightforward as it sounds. So you're going to take the seed and you're going to directly plant it in the soil. You're going to water it, wait for it to germinate, and there you go. Versus transplant, which is all that we are doing here on our farm. We're actually starting our seeds in pots and trays, and we're starting them well before you can actually put them out. So we're starting some of these things before we're free of our frost date, and we're keeping them nice and cozy in our greenhouse. We're making sure we're controlling the environment. Maybe we're starting them in the house, and then we're transplanting them out. And the reason that we choose to transplant versus direct seed is we're on a very small scale. So I need only my healthiest, most viable plants to go out. And I can ensure that by choosing the healthiest, most vibrant transplants. Another reason why we do this is we're trying to get ahead of the game, right? So I want my plants to be nice and established before I put them in the ground so that I can be harvesting blooms faster. However, we are a for-profit farm and we are growing cut flowers for profit. So if you are a backyard gardener, I say direct seed. And all of the flowers I'm going to share with you today can be direct seeded after you are free of your last frost, which hopefully many of us are. Many of you listening, tuning in, hopefully you are free and you are enjoying the spring garden. So that's great because it is going to save you time, energy, and resources to direct seed it. But if you do want to start seeds, I'm going to put in the description below, or you can check it out right here, my must-have seed starting supplies. These are a game changer, especially when it comes to pots and trays. So now let's talk about my top cut flowers to plant in May. First up, it is none other than the beautiful sunflower. I love growing sunflowers. In fact, they are one of the most profitable flowers that we grow on our farm, which I'm going to talk more about later next week. But sunflowers are beautiful. They're super easy to grow. And in fact, if you actually buy sunflowers and you look on the back of your seed packet, they're actually going to tell you that they do not recommend being transplanted because they don't like their roots being disturbed. However, I'm a rebel. I've transplanted my sunflowers for as long as I've grown them and had great success. But they are one of those that is great to plant in your garden. You can plant them once you are free of your last frost date. They do not need any sort of support, so that's great. They don't need any additional trellising. And they're going to provide you abundant, beautiful blooms depending on the varieties that you're growing. So here on our farm at Whispering Willow, we grow Pro-Cut Excel orange. So we'll do an orange and a peach. When we move into the fall, we'll do maybe some plums and things like that. But what that means, a single cut, so it's a pro-cut single flower, it's meaning it's producing one single bloom, you're cutting it, and then that's it. Versus a branching sunflower, it's going to put off multiple branches. You can cut off of those and you're getting more. There are pros and cons. If you're looking for efficiency and production, I think the single cut profile is your best bet. I just like how uniform they look. I can transplant out X amount every single week. But if you're just wanting to add some beauty to your garden, you want to make a beautiful arrangement for your home, maybe you're trying to attract more bees and butterflies and pollinators, sunflowers are one of those that you need to go buy you some seeds right now and get in your garden and plant out in May. So next up, let's talk about the beloved Zenia. Zinnias are so great for so many different reasons. One, they're a cut and come again flower. So unlike that single cut sunflower I was just talking about, these cut and come again varieties mean the more that you cut them, the more they're going to produce. So it is really cool because you can put in one planting and you can harvest off of that same planting for a very, very long time as long as you're cutting blooms. And what that means is even if you don't maybe have time to go and cut a beautiful arrangement for your table, still go outside and do something that's called deadheading and cut it off anyways. That way it just continues to encourage that plant to put on more blooms instead of going to seed, which obviously we don't want. Now, I do recommend using some sort of trellising for zinnias if you're growing a bunch for a long time. When I just had a small backyard food garden, I would just grow little zinnias in the corners of my raised bed gardens, and it worked great. I obviously didn't worry about supporting those. But if you are dedicating an entire bed to zinnias or you want a larger space, they are going to benefit from having some sort of hortanova netting. This is just going to encourage you've got, straighter stems, but they are great direct seeded. There are so many fun varieties. You can buy giants, which produce these massive blooms. You can do these little pom-poms, which are just tiny, tiny little fillers. You can do cactus-like zinnias. I mean, the options are endless when it comes to the varieties available for growing zinnias. That 100%, if you're looking for a top cut flower to plant in May, zinnias should be on your list. So next up, we have got a flower that I have just recently come to love and appreciate. Now, being in the cut flower world, I've heard of this flower often. I just never valued it enough, I guess, to allow it the space to grow and bloom in my own gardens. But I changed that this year in a massive way, and that is the Cosmo. So Cosmo is known as a filler flower, beautiful in bouquets, lots of different varieties that are doubles, lots of beautiful colors, things like whites and pinks, creams and blushes. It's just beautiful, especially for a spring arrangement. The great thing about the Cosmo is that it is also a cut and come again, meaning the more you harvest it, the more they're going to produce. Now, I started mine because, like I mentioned, we are transplanting everything on here on the farm. And that is one of those flowers that I wish I hadn't have done. I think it would have done better just being direct seeded, but they are absolutely stunning. They have these really thin stems, but just these really showy flowers that accent a bouquet beautifully. They have been attracting some crazy, amazing beneficial pollinators. And so I cannot recommend Cosmos enough. All right, so a couple other filler flowers I recommend planting right now in May that make great cut flowers is basil. There are a lot of different varieties of basil that once you allow them to flower, they throw these beautiful spikes and are perfect additions to arrangements and bouquets. And the great thing about basil too is, as many of you guys know, it is a culinary herb. So not only does basil make a great cut flower, surprisingly, it's a culinary herb, as many of us know, so it's dual purpose, which I absolutely love. The more you cut and harvest basil, the bushier it's going to be, the more it's going to produce. Now, you don't have to actually trellis basil. However, I prefer to just to kind of corral it a bit, but super easy direct seeded. It's one of those that's a great self-seeder too. So if you have the space and you can let it go to seed, not harvest them, then you've guaranteed you have basil for the next year. The variety we are growing specifically for bouquets is an Aramato. We've been growing it for a few years now. We really like it. But again, there are so many different options. If you go to like Johnny's Seeds and you go to cut flowers, they will list which basil they recommend for cut flower foliage. So if that's something you're interested in, there'll be a link down below as well. Celosia is another great cut flower to plant right now in May. It is so fun because there are so many different varieties. I even didn't realize, when you think about the traditional celosia, you think about this little feathery, spiky thing. But now, as more flower farmers have started breeding and coming up with their own varieties, there is a lot of depth and texture and versatility with celosia, specifically with Floret Farm varieties. So I'm growing a lot of hers this year, and they're just fun. They're also one of those flowers that you can use them fresh in arrangements. They dry really well, so you can use them later in the season. It's a cut and come again. You'll notice I'm mentioning a lot of cut and come agains because it's the least amount of work on us as the gardener and the farmer, and it's going to yield us the most. All we have to do is keep harvesting. If we keep harvesting, they're going to keep producing, and I love anything that's going to be a workhorse on the farm. And so the great thing about these, right, so we're talking about zinnias, basil, celosia, even sunflowers. Even if you just planted those 4 varieties, you have got everything you need right in your backyard to be able to make beautiful arrangements every single week. Because you've got your zinnias, which depending on the variety that you grow, could be your focal flower. You've got your basil and your celosia, which can be your fillers. You've got your sunflowers, which is obviously going to be a focal and a primary flower as well. So you really don't have to grow a whole lot of varieties to be able to have a beautiful bouquet for your table every single week, especially if you're changing up these varieties. So you're going to have different colors every week. It's going to feel new and exciting, and it's going to keep you guys hopefully engaged as you are building out your cut flower garden. But I could not sit here and tell you guys top cut flowers to plant in May without mentioning this one. Now, this one is going to require a little bit more. It's going to be way more expensive than just buying seeds off the internet, but y'all, it is May and I am a flower farmer, so I've got to tell you guys about my favorite flower we grow, and that is the Dahlia. So in May and June is when many of us farmers and gardeners are getting our dahlias out into the field. Again, you can start these ahead of time. You can take cuttings off of them. I have lots of information, but you can also just get the tuber and plant the tuber. Dahlias are also one of those varieties that you can grow from seed. It is a little bit different, and depending on what your goals are for your farm, really will determine whether you should plant a tuber or plant a seed. But we have been in full-blown dahlia planting mode. Dahlias come in so many different shapes, sizes, colors, varieties. You could literally just make your own arrangement with the different dahlia varieties. And so I really recommend you guys play around with this. If you are growing tubers, they produce more tubers each year, so it's a one-time investment. And so you can plant them in the ground. After your frost has come, dig them up, store them properly, and then you have enough stock, double stock hopefully, to plant again next year. But dahlias are showy, they're fun, they are a beautiful addition to any cut flower garden, and May is the perfect time to get them in the ground to make sure that they produce beautiful blooms all summer long. So in honor of doing this video, I just got done planting my second succession of sunflowers. So we are growing 288 sunflowers a week, transplanting 288 sunflowers a week. Like I told you guys, these are a powerhouse workhorse for us here on our farm. But I wanted to share with you guys, what are those top cut flowers you can be growing in May? I feel like a lot of times we feel like, man, we've missed the boat, we're too late. Especially if you come from the vegetable garden side of things, right? Where if you're starting from seed, you really need to think about that. If you're growing those things like tomatoes, eggplants, peppers that take a while. But with flowers, they grow so quickly that you can start them way later. So I don't want you guys to feel like you're behind. I've started all these super early, transplanted them out, but we are now starting our second wave of so many of these flowers that will make their way back out into our garden this May. From our zinnias and celosias that you just saw, to our dahlias back here, dried flowers over here, we are growing a little bit of everything here at Whispering Willow Farm, and I cannot wait to share with you what they look like when they are in full bloom. But if you were wondering what cut flowers you can be growing right now in May, this is my top recommendation. But thanks for hanging out with me. I'll talk to you soon.